While people are arguing whether or not large language models hit a wall or not, Anthropic drops this little gem, Claude 3.5 Sonnet, and it feels like we passed a certain threshold that I think has some pretty big implications. So I've asked it to create a Flappy Bird game, so it writes out the code in the artifact window. That looks pretty good. You know, I gotta say, out of all the models I've tested, this has gotta be the best Flappy Bird game that I've ever seen. Let's create a snake game. Let's make the fruit images instead appear as Dungeons and Dragons monsters. Looks like it's generating owlbear and mind flayer. Oh, this is good. Gelatinous cube. I like where you're going with this, Claude. I'm not expecting amazing stuff here, but the fact that, I mean, sure, this is a goblin. A dragon? Yes, why not? Beholder, excellent. Again, if it has to fit in a 20 by 20 pixel image, this is probably going to show up really good. Add another feature. Let's have text flash for a second at the top of the screen each time you eat an enemy. Let's give each monster a number of XP points. So as we eat them, Mind Flayer is 9, Beholder is 17. Let's get a little bit more complicated. All right, so Dragon slayed, or whatever that was. Yeah, dragon. And let's see what happens when it crosses the snake. Ooh, that's perfect. I gotta say, absolutely terrific. This is exactly what I wanted. It worked phenomenally well. I'm actually kind of blown away. Claude, you're blowing my mind here. Describe how this blender bottle works.
The VoltRx blender bottle works by using a rechargeable motorized base to spin a detachable blade inside the bottle.
Can you guess what TV show this is from?
That's Tony Soprano from The Sopranos. He's feeding the ducks.
I asked it to create a Doom-like game. I assumed it would just say no, but it said, sure, we can do that. But I was not ready for this. It created as a playable game in a browser and just literally play it walking around. You can see the map up there in the top left. So it's saying press spacebar to swing the axe. So I guess, it's coming at me. It's coming right for me. It killed me. What difficulty is this? Looks like the other student is asking genomics slides tonight, Queen. So the student pulls up Claude and it says, good evening, Sam. There's so many things to unpack there. I'm not going to even go into it. So either I'm reading way too much into this or they're baking in actual diss tracks in their product releases now. What do you think this means?
Word boards. The letters are jumbled.
It actually means that there's a bear inside of something. Can you tell what the saying is about the bear?
Bear on board. The jumbled letters, WBOEODRS, can be rearranged to spell.
So the solution is bear in the blank. What is the blank?
The blank is woods. The full phrase is bear in the woods, which can be formed by rearranging
Bingo.
the letters in WORS.
One of Claude's developers said this. Claude makes you feel like you have superpowers. Suddenly, no problem is too ambitious. The future of programming is here, folks. If you like having superpowers, subscribe.
While people are arguing whether or not large language models hit a wall or not, Anthropic drops this little gem, Claude 3.5 Sonnet, and it feels like we passed a certain threshold that I think has some pretty big implications because take a look at its coding ability, right? So it says 92% and everything's 0 shot, so no examples. You ask it a question, it gives you an answer. That's a big leap over Claude 3 Opus. It's also a modest improvement over GPT-4o, the Omni model. After using it for several hours of coding, I gotta say it feels much bigger. That leap feels much bigger than what these numbers show. And I'm not crazy. I'm not the only one. Here's what people are saying about this model. Absolute huge. Sonnet 3.5 is a beast. How to code a game in Claude with 3 sentences. Sonnet 3.5 is blowing my mind. Early tests on our benchmarks are returning extremely phenomenal results. Can't believe our eyes, so we will rerun some tests. The 3.5 model is very, very impressive, and the artifacts it generates are a simpler version of the code interpreter. Claude Artifacts is crazy. You gotta try this. In case it wasn't clear, it's now official. LLMs have not hit a wall. I was trying to sleep in this morning, but this tweet hit me like a 10-shot espresso. Claude is starting to get really good at coding and autonomously fixing pull requests. It's becoming clear that in a year's time, a large percentage of code will be written by LLMs. Now, you can't believe everything you hear online, right? We've heard some wild claims before, but after testing this model, I gotta say it feels fundamentally different. For coding specifically, I'm talking about. Its ability to create something and then keep adding features to it without introducing new errors, new bugs without forgetting what we were doing, without losing old features that it already incorporated. Its ability to do that is bar none the best available right now. Out of all the models I've tested, usually test all the best ones. I don't think there's anything close to this. And I don't think that gets captured in these benchmarks. These benchmarks are impressive, but they don't express what happened here. You kind of have to see it. In this video, we're going to take it through its bases on coding, on creating a game from scratch and adding features to it as we go along, troubleshooting and fixing bugs along the way with zero code being written by me, zero. It creates all the code, all the graphics, it fixes all the bugs. I kick back and let the robots do the work. 2 is we pull a somewhat complicated project off of GitHub, so somebody else written up a project, coded up a project for creating your very own voice assistant that takes the webcam stream and is able to answer questions about what's happening. And this is where it really goes off the rails for me because that code is fairly long. There's a lot of different things that are happening in that code. It's not like a short code block. It's like a whole project. And I tell Claude 3.5 to start adding functionality, to start changing things up. It does it incredibly well. There's a few things that it's not able to do, but it seems like those are limitations of the actual models or other things. So it's not that Claude is getting these things wrong. These are just other limitations that exist. Before, when people asked if all coding will be done by LLMs soon, I kind of said, no, not really. That's probably not going to happen. This is making me reconsider some of those assumptions a little bit. It's getting eerily good. After coding, we'll test its vision abilities. It does seem like there's another small leap forward here. It still gets things wrong, but very oftentimes with a little bit of prodding and prompting, if you tell it, well, that's not right, can you try again? It will usually figure it out. There's still certain things that it completely fails at, just like GPT-4 with vision before it. So for example, if you're measuring something with a ruler or you're trying to read the speedometer, like they're just terrible at that. But other things it's getting surprisingly good at. But as we cover all this, kind of keep this image in mind, right? So Anthropic's models, Claude 3, they have 3 sort of tiers, 3 sizes. And of course, the bigger it is, the more expensive it is to run. It's usually slower. So it can be bigger, slower, but smarter, or it can be smaller, faster, cheaper. So Haiku is the small one. So 3 is the previous sort of iteration of these models. So Haiku is the smaller one, the fast one, the cheap one. Sonnet is the midline one, right? And then Opus is the great one, the big one, right? So Claude 3 Opus, when it came out, it was kind of blowing people's minds. It was very, very good. It was shockingly good. We've covered a lot of the things that it could do. It was impressive. So now Anthropic drops this new model that's got everyone in a tizzy. But notice it's not the big model. It's not Claude 3.5 Opus, it's Claude 3.5 Sonnet. So the midline model is now much better than the previous iteration of the large model. So what happens when they drop the big one? Folks, I don't think we're hitting a wall. Not at all. Let's dive in. So here's artifacts, create and iterate on documents, code, and more within Claude. Try it out. Ask Claude to generate content like code snippets, text documents, or website designs, and Claude will create an artifact that appears in a dedicated window alongside your conversation. So I've asked it to create a Flappy Bird game, so it writes out the code in the artifact window, and that explains what it's doing, outputs the text on the left. All right, I'll just throw this in there, and let's hit play. That looks pretty good. You know, I gotta say, out of all the models I've tested, this has gotta be the best Flappy Bird game that I've ever seen. It's smooth, it looks good, it's very well done, and I gotta say, this is actually one of the best functioning games. Okay, let's try something else. Let's create a snake game. We'll start simple and keep adding features to make it more interesting. All right, so it has a basic snake game. We have the various food. It ends if the snake hits the wall or itself. So it's pretty good. It doesn't start until I hit a button. It just kind of is in pause mode by default, and when it goes, it keeps eating. So everything's working fine so far. I gotta say, on the first try, everything works. So when I hit a wall, the game ends. There doesn't seem to be a score or anything else. Let's make the fruit images instead appear as Dungeons and Dragons monsters. Generate 10 different images and have them appear randomly as fruit. It says, that's a creative and fun idea. Looks like it's generating owlbear and mind flayer. Oh, this is good and gelatinous cube. I like where you're going with this, Claude. One thing, and I've said this before, for some reason, Claude always seemed to me to be the most, I don't know, personable one. It's the one where I feel like it's a thing, it's a person, it's some entity. With ChatGPT, I don't. With any of the Gemini technology, I don't. Claude is like, yeah, hey, Claude, thanks, buddy. It's good to see you again. It's weird. So let's see. So it created a goblin, a dragon, a beholder, a mimic, an owlbear, mind flayer, etc. Rust monster. 2 mimics for some reason, but okay. Did you run out of ideas? Okay, that's fine. I like how it explains what it's doing. So it's saying in order to put those images into the game, it's importing the SVG module from Pygame. Looks like it added this thing here, GFX draw, and then it randomly selects a monster and creates it instead of the simple rectangle for food. It even has some notes such as the monster images are scaled to fit the snake's block size. So I would give it a 10 out of 10 for the text response. The text response is excellent. The images, as far as it can tell, I mean, I'm not expecting amazing stuff here, but the fact that, I mean, sure, this is a goblin. A dragon? Yes, why not? Beholder, excellent. You keep in mind, these are going to be tiny little things. I think originally it was 20 by 20 pixels, right? So we don't need a lot of detail. You know, mimic, an owlbear, mind flayer. Mind flayers are an humanoid octopus sort of thing for those unfamiliar with D&D lore. I gotta say, I mean, that's, you know, again, if it has to fit in a 20 by 20 pixel image, this is probably going to show up really good. And it also kind of, I mean, yeah, sure, it works. Gelatinous cube, okay. Displacer beast, rust monster. These are excellent. Now, unfortunately, I clicked on the X button up here to close the images, and now the artifact window is gone. So let's see how easy it's actually to bring it back. Okay, so it looks like in the chat controls here, we have each artifact, as they call them, as a separate thing, the separate chat. Here's our basic snake game, and we have version 1 and version 2. Oh, version 1 was the original non-Dungeon and Dragon one, and version 2 is our new and improved Dungeon and Dragon snake game. Let's try it out. Now, of course, it's not finding the images in our working directory, but it does right here actually tell us specifically that we need to save those in the same directory as the Python script and make sure the file names match. If I had to nitpick, I would kind of maybe bold this or somehow indent this to show me that, hey, yes, indeed, this is important because this is, you need this to run. And here's where it kind of calls those images. So what we need to do is download those images. All right, so here we have to go one by one and click download file. A little bit annoying, but I wish there was like a one button download, or I mean something that would make it a little bit easier, but it's not that big of a deal. Where this would get super annoying is if we have to fix tons of errors and we have to keep doing this over and over again to fix stuff. And now let's run the game. One annoying thing that I'm seeing right off the bat is that the file names were named, as you can see here, for example, mimic-svg, but it's called as mimic. So we have to come in here and fix that. Not a huge deal. All right, there we go. Fixed. Let's try it again. And that wasn't a big deal. It took me, you know, 5 to 10 seconds to troubleshoot that, 5 to 10 seconds to fix it, assuming I had my coffee that day. But as we iterate and go back and forth with Claude, this might break things. Those little mistakes here and there can add up. Actually, now that I think about it, we do need to tell it about this error to see if it can correct it. But before that, let's just try playing this game. Does it work? It does. As you can see here, we ate a, I forget what that is, displacer beast. And there's a, that's a displacer beast. And a beholder and whatever that is. Cool. Very cool. There's a illithid, a goblin. Terrific. Terrific. All right, so I gotta say it performed admirably. Let's see if it can correct the mistake that it made. So we're gonna say the image files are called, for example, mimic-svg.svg. And the code calls mimic.svg. This is true for all files. Please correct the code to make it match the file names. I expect it should be able to do this pretty easily. Let's see. I think it nailed it. Yeah, I think it did everything perfectly. Let's just verify really fast. Click play. And yes, it works. All right, so far, Claude is killing it. Next, let's add another feature. Let's have text flash for a second at the top of the screen each time you eat an enemy. It should say, for example, if you eat that dragon, dragon slayed. Now notice I'm specifically, purposely not spelling it out. I'm giving an example and it has to reason, it has to understand. Has to deduce what I want. So I'm saying if it's a dragon, it says dragon slayed. So based on that, it's supposed to understand that, you know, for mimic, I should say mimic slayed, goblin slayed, etc. Let's try it. So it updated the monster images list comprehension to include the monster name along with the scaled image. The monster images list now includes both the file name and the monster name. So as you can see here, it updated this list to have both. This is excellent. I gotta say, it's not like a huge deal to do, but if you're doing this yourself, and again, not that many years ago, 2 years ago, you were kind of doing it yourself. You had to do this by hand. It's not rocket science, but it takes focus, attention to detail. You could easily screw things up. It's a cognitive load that's expended to do something that's basically, cleaning up or documenting. And I think things like this is why a lot of people struggle with coding. One of the many reasons, but this is certainly one of them. And here, as you can see, poof, it did it. Well, number one, it knew that it had to do it in order to implement this feature. It just went ahead and did it. And it told me in a few simple lines what it did. This is so far excellent. So it's displaying the message in milliseconds. So this would be 1 second, right? 1,000 milliseconds. So I could easily change this to precisely change, how long the text sticks around on screen. I'm excited to try this. Let's go. All right, there it is. All right, so let's, yes, Owlbear Slade. And now Rust Monster, Mind Flayer Slade. And I can't get this thing. No, this is embarrassing. There go Dragon Displacer Beast Slade. Rust Monster Slade. This is terrific. Beholder Slade, Dragon Slade. Perfect. This is getting very, very impressive. All right, let's create a point system. Let's give each monster a number of XP points that the player earns when it eats that monster. Let's have the number of XP points be equivalent to what that monster's relative strength is. For example, Dragon is stronger than Goblin. Dragon should be worth much more points. Let's use between 1 and 20 points per kill. Add an XP counter in one of the corners. All right, let's see how well that does. By the way, these generations are super fast, impressively fast. At this point, it's getting to the point where, it's not instant, but you're not sitting around waiting for it. This is the longest it took, and that was maybe a few seconds. And then, of course, the text generates on this side, but you don't even have to wait for it since this is its own window, right? Actually, I am loving the fact that this is its own window. The artifacts are separate, meaning I can grab this code while the text is still printing out. All right, let's try that out. And here we go. Perfect. So notice the XP bar, or at least the number in the top left there. So as we eat them, Mind Flayer is 9, Beholder is 17, Rust Monster is 5, I think it said. Beholder 17, Goblin is 1. All right, I like that. And as you can see, the experience bar is moving on. Dragon is 20. So it put Dragon as 20. This is perfect. This is phenomenal. Notice how few mistakes it made so far, because mistakes are a problem because they kind of build on top of each other. Once it starts making mistakes, as you keep adding features, stuff breaks down. So far, we've been able to add a number of different features and it works perfectly. It missed that whole naming notation, but other than that, it's perfect. Let's get a little bit more complicated. We're going to add 2 features. One, make the snake extend the same amount of blocks as the number of XP points, right? So if it eats a dragon that's worth 20 points, instead of growing by 1 unit, it grows by 20. So it's going to be the same number as the number of XP points it earns. But we're going to make it extra difficult by adding the second feature that has to play nice with the previous feature. So this is some advanced stuff for Claude to figure out. 2 is make random falling objects from the top of the screen. If they intersect the snake, they cut off everything after where they hit. The part of the snake that's cut off should stay for a few seconds, then disappear. So I gotta say, this is probably the single hardest prompt for coding that I've given, just one of these chatbots directly without any architecture around it, just like a back and forth, not only because of the complexity of the prompt, but also because of how many things we've built on top of that initial sort of prompt. So if it does this, Claude, I gotta say, in my book, will be the best coding assistant ever. Notice it updated our little list with the experience that each monster gives us. And here it's writing out the cutoff segment, duration, etc. Very interesting. Let's test it out. All right, here we go. Let's see what it does. Oh, I can see something falling from the sky. Nice. Mind Flayer gives me 15 points. So I'm getting huge. And let's see what happens. So something broke when one of those little red objects intersected, but I gotta say, I'm not disappointed. It got everything else so perfect. I'm actually impressed that it got this far. Let's see if it can correct its own error, or the error that it caused. I'm just gonna paste it in there. I'm not even gonna explain it. I'm just gonna literally copy and paste the error into it. The issue is occurring because we're modifying the cut segments list while iterating over it. Let's fix this by changing how we handle the cut segments. So it explains exactly what it did here. This is incredible. The fact that it can explain its reasoning. If you're learning how to code, if you're trying to understand how to handle stuff like this, this is incredible. All right, here we go. Let's test it out. All right, so Dragon Slade, or whatever that was. Yeah, Dragon. And let's see what happens when it crosses the snake. Ooh. That's perfect. So it kept on screen for a little, it changed colors, which is great. And it disappeared. Oh, that's so great. This is working flawlessly. I gotta say, absolutely terrific. This is exactly what I wanted. It worked phenomenally well. I'm actually kind of blown away because this is the first time where it didn't screw anything up. It actually worked as intended, and we didn't have to battle it. It gets a few things wrong here and there, but it fixes them. And at the end, you get this perfectly playable game that, and this is the most important part, you can keep building upon. You can keep changing things to make it work better and better. Wow. Wow. Notice how when I go straight up through it, it even knows how to handle that. I wonder what happens if I do this. Let's see if I can create an error here. Yep. And it figured out that hitting the red thing with the last piece of the snake is a lost condition and the game ends. Claude, you're blowing my mind here, I gotta say. So I've tested a lot of the different models before. Certainly all the top ones I've tested, and nothing is this good. It kept all the features. Notice that throughout that whole time, nothing got lost. Nothing just, ceased to exist. Each new piece that we've added, each new feature, and as we built on top of them, none of them just disappeared. It all remained in the game. And during that whole time, there were 2 minor issues, both of which Claude fixed on the first attempt. I give it the error message and it fixes it. I tell it, hey, you got the wrong, naming convention before, and it fixes it. It remembers it and it stays fixed. This feels fundamentally like a game changer. We've crossed some barrier, some threshold where it's now accurate enough to make it very useful. And if you think about how quickly we got to this point, like a year ago, we were not really anywhere close to this. And now it's working well. This is phenomenal. And I got to say, a little bit scary. All right, let's push it a little bit more. Okay, so this is a project we've covered before. So it's made by Santiago Valderrama. So he's got a YouTube channel. He's on Twitter, X, and he's got this really cool project. So he called it the Alloy Voice Assistant. Here's the code for that. And here's kind of what this does. So if I run that file, what am I holding up to the camera right now?
Looks like you're holding up a tube of chapstick.
What am I holding up to the camera right now?
You're holding up a bottle of Arrowhead water.
What am I holding up to the camera right now?
You're holding up a Voltarex blender bottle.
Describe how this blender bottle works.
The Voltarex blender bottle works by using a rechargeable motorized base. It's portable and convenient for mixing on the go.
So I've detached the bottom piece. What does the bottom piece do?
The bottom piece houses the motor and rechargeable battery.
So that's pretty cool, right? It's a assistant that is able to look at the kind of how your camera's streaming. So it takes those screenshots and then answers whatever questions you pose to it using either the Gemini model or OpenAI's, GPT-4o or whatever else you want to use.
That sounds like a pretty advanced setup.
I agree. Let's close this out, close this out, close this out.
Glad we're on the same page.
All right, so that's cool and all, but as you can see here, there's a lot of code. There's a lot of things going on here. And by default, we just have the Gemini and the OpenAI model that we can use. But what if we wanted to change some things up? What if we wanted to add some functionality? Now, normally, how much things you can change would depend on your ability to code. So for example, if you're a beginner coder, you can probably figure out that right now the model is set to Gemini 1.5 Flash latest. And if we wanted to use a different model, for example, Chat OpenAI, the GPT-4o model, right? So we would comment this out, we would uncomment this, and then it would use this model instead of this one. But there's a lot of other stuff that would be more difficult to do. For example, if instead of using the webcam, we wanted to use something that screenshots our desktop and then sends it to the model instead so it can comment on what's happening on our desktop, that would be, significantly more difficult. All right, so first and foremost, I'm going to copy this file and I'm going to start a new chat in Claude, and we're going to say, describe what this Python project does. Oh, that's interesting. So when I Control V to paste that whole project, it goes into this little pasted text of 171 lines instead of just showing up here, which is excellent. Claude keeps surprising to the upside. It's really good. So we're going to hit go and it nails it. So it's an interactive AI assistant, combines visual and audio inputs with natural language processing. So webcam integration check. I mean, there it is. It literally describes what we're doing with the live stream from the computer's webcam, utilizes a microphone to continuously listen for user speech input, converts speech to text using OpenAI's Whisper model. This is kind of a big deal because it's not super easy to just understand all that. Like you have to sit there and kind of go through the code to really understand exactly what it's doing, what tools it's using. Then it uses Google's Gemini model or OpenAI's GPT-4 commented out. So it picks up on the fact that this model is commented out, but you can, exchange it. and it uses that to process user queries. And the AI takes into account both the user's spoken question and the current webcam usage, maintains a conversational history, and then generates the text to speech, right? So when the model answers, it generates that into speech. That's why we hear the assistant answering us. And it also has a window for the visual display. So that's why you were able to see me on my camera holding stuff up to the camera. And then the program runs in a loop, constantly capturing webcam footage and listening for voice input. So step one, I'm going to say, rewrite the code and add in-depth comments to every block of code so I can understand what piece of code does what. So we're going to go ahead and hit go. All right, so it's done. That took maybe a little bit over 10 seconds. We're going to copy this. And here's that project file, the original one. So as you can see here, it's just code, not too many comments or anything like that. So we're just going to copy and paste the Claude 3 output instead. So there it is. Now the green text is the comment. So it's telling us exactly what each piece of code is doing, right? So webcam stream class for handling webcam input, initialize the video capture device, read the first frame, etc. All right, now let's see what we can do to change up the things within that project. So for example, one of the things that it does is it uses text to speech to voice the output, right? So we have different voice options. By default, we're using Alloy, hence the name of the project. But let's say we wanted to use Shimmer. So we'll go into Claude and we'll say, right now the voice assistant's voice is set to Alloy. Please change it to Shimmer. All right, so it looks like it just changed the actual code block. Now I'm sure if we ask it to write everything out, it would, but I think it's just trying to conserve tokens. But let me throw this in there and see how that works. Boom. So let me run that really fast and see if it did that. What time is it here?
It's 12:53.
All right, so that was super easy, right? No, nothing too complicated. Let's kick it up a notch. All right, so now I've taken that project again, pasted it in here so that we're writing from scratch. And we're saying, rewrite this so that instead of using the webcam, it takes screenshots and uses those images instead. So basically keep the entire functionality, but instead of the webcam, instead of using the images from the webcam, we're using screenshots of our desktop. All right, looks like we get a little error message. I'll just post that back in there. It was able to solve it in other instances. So this should, okay, so it looks like maybe we need to pip install pillow. Pip install pillow. Assistant is running. Tell me what you see.
It's running, but it's missing pillow. You'll need to install it.
Tell me what you see on the screen right now.
You're missing the pillow library. Install it by running the command pip install pillow.
Tell me what you see on the screen right now.
It's a picture of a man in a white robe standing in the water with ducks. He's giving a thumbs up.
Can you guess what TV show this is from?
That's Tony Soprano from The Sopranos. He's feeding the ducks.
Tell me what you see on the screen right now.
It's a screenshot of a web browser displaying a GIF from the game Commander Keen 4. The character is walking along a path.
What am I looking at right now?
You're looking at a Google Chrome browser window. The browser is displaying a web page with an image of a Minecraft room. There's a red carpet and a chest.
Can you guess what this code does?
This code converts text to speech using the OpenAI API and plays it back using PyAudio.
Is this the code that you run on?
Yes, that's the code I use to run. It's the core of my assistant.
All right, but let's make it a little bit more interesting. What if instead of Gemini or GPT-4o, we wanted to use the Claude API, to use the Claude 3.5 Sonnet to be our assistant and to answer these questions for us? So again, I've pasted the whole project in there and we're going to tell Claude, remake this project, but instead of Gemini, let's use the model Claude 3.5 Sonnet. Let's test it out. All right, so it looks like it's using Claude 3 Sonnet from February 29th of 2024. So we might have to manually update this, but all right, so it looks like this is the model -3-5 Sonnet. So if I told Claude to put that in there, I'm sure it would be able to do that at this point. I'm convinced that it would be able to update it, but I'm going to go ahead and just put it in manually myself. I added that in there and let's run it again to see what happens. It gives me an error. Again, I'll just paste it into Claude and have it fix it for me. Of course, it's pip install something, pip install LangChain Anthropic. So for people that don't code, like it's basically just telling me the command I need to put in. You don't even really have to understand what's happening. It helps to know what's going on, but at this point, you know, you don't have to. What am I holding up to the screen right now? Your credit balance is too low to access Claude API. Okay. So I reloaded the credits. So let's see, what am I holding up to the screen right now? I paid you, so you better answer.
You're holding up a chapstick to the screen.
What do you see written on the paper?
The image shows a notebook with ball written on it, along with a simple eye drawing. A microphone is visible in the frame.
Based on what's written on the paper, what do you think is the word that it symbolizes?
The word ball likely symbolizes eyeball in this context. The drawing of an eye next to the word ball suggests this combined meaning.
So it looks like there's a limit. I think it's 3,000 tokens per minute or 10 minutes or whatever the limit is. So I can't do too many tests with the Claude 3.5 Sonnet.
Understandable.
Oh, it's
API
back.
rate limits can be frustrating when testing.
Yeah.
The image shows a person recording audio, likely for a podcast or stream.
What am I holding up to the camera right now?
You're holding up an orange screwdriver to the camera.
What am I holding up to the camera right now?
You're holding an infrared thermometer. It's a yellow and black handheld device typically used for measuring surface temperatures.
What am I holding up to the camera right now?
You're holding a spirit level.
What am I holding up to the camera right now?
You're holding a blue stud finder or wall scanner device. It has indicator lights on top and appears to be a wireless model.
What am I holding up to the camera right now?
You're holding a small USB device or dongle.
Can you guess what this object is?
The object you're holding is a Sharpie marker.
I asked it to create a Doom-like game. I assumed it would just say no, but it said, sure, we can do that. But I was not ready for this. It created as a playable game in a browser. So you can click on here and just literally play it walking around. You can see the map up there in the top left. This is kind of insane, kind of crazy. I had a weapon that's an axe that I can swing to attack. I had a monster that claws me if I get close. And there goes writing out the code. All right, so it's saying press spacebar to swing the axe. So I guess, it's coming at me. It's coming right for me. It killed me. What difficulty is this? Let's refresh. Oh, it's coming right for me. Okay, so we're going to hit it. Okay, so I can hit it with my axe by using the spacebar and kill it like this. So if it gets too close, I lose health. Not quite what we were looking for, but not too bad. Let's try this. Make the enemy stationary in one location on the map. All right, so that's the enemy, I guess. It's in the corner, so I can come up to it and hit it. All right, so it has an error here, and I think that's because it put the monster outside of the bounds of the map. The monster started outside the map. Make sure the monster starts inside the bounds of the map. The other kind of interesting thing I've noticed is, so this ran for a while, maybe 10 plus seconds. Take a look at how much code it writes to kind of satisfy all the stuff that we're asking for. All right, so if we go here to preview, the monster is sitting right there. All right, so yes, it is within the bounds of the map, so it's kind of in the corner here. So we approach it. Well, it killed me. So I guess if I get too close within, I think it's at 150 units or whatever, then it starts hurting me. Let's see. All right. So we approach it and we start hitting it and I win. I got to say there's a lot of good things happening here. It's not perfect, but I think what I need to do is start from the beginning and kind of explain exactly what I'm looking for, because this isn't like the snake game where it's just a little bit more simple. Here I have to explain a little bit more, but I gotta say Claude really kind of gets the issues, how to fix certain things, and as long as I can explain what I want, it should be able to create the stuff. Again, very, very solid performance here. Not perfect, but very solid. And I really do feel like this is a skill issue on my part. If I spend a few hours messing around with it, I will be able to create stuff like this, no problem. All right, so here's their blog post on Anthropic.com about the Claude 3.5 Sonnet release. And so the 3.5 is their forthcoming model family, so kind of the next step in the evolution. And this is their first release kind of in that 3.5 family. And again, it's looking like Claude 3.5 Sonnet is available for free. So similar to how OpenAI is doing it, they're allowing their best models to be free for everybody. You don't need a subscription to access it, but if you do have a subscription, you get significantly higher rate limits. And of course, you're also able to access the API through Anthropic API, through Amazon Bedrock, and Google Cloud Vertex AI as well. And the model costs $3 per million input tokens and $15 per million output tokens with a 200,000 token context window. So if we're comparing that to OpenAI, so GPT-4o, the latest model, input is $5 per million tokens versus Anthropic's $3 per million. OpenAI is almost double the price. And for GPT-4o, $15 per million tokens for the output, same as the Claude 3.5 Sonnet. So Anthropic wins a little bit on the input and matches on the output. Claude 3.5 Sonnet operates at twice the speed of Claude 3 Opus. So it's much better, much smarter, twice as fast, and less expensive. Here's the little clip about state-of-the-art vision. Looks like the other student is asking genomics slides tonight, Queen. So the student pulls up Claude and it says, "Good evening, Sam." There's so many things to unpack there. I'm not going to even go into it. Keep in mind, Anthropic broke off of OpenAI. They broke away to kind of form this company so they can create something that's their own, that's, safer. So either I'm reading way too much into this, or they're baking in actual diss tracks in their product releases now. But I'll leave it alone. Let's continue. And they kind of walk through a step-by-step of how to use, this AI assistant to to complete homework assignments using vision, uploading documents, and collaborating, working together, going back and forth with these ideas to output the final product. Which I gotta say, this is the future. It's becoming pretty obvious that we're all gonna have these sort of assistants that help us out in whatever computer tasks that we're doing. And with this release, I gotta say, Anthropic is killing it because there's a lot of these really cool, really intuitive things that are added in there that just work. I definitely feel like they are at this point gaining, or I mean, with this release, it certainly feels like they've passed OpenAI. I've shown this in a different part of the video, but if I copy this text on the right, this long code that's in there, and I paste it into Claude, now normally what would happen is just it would be pages and pages pasted into that prompt window, right? But no, look, instead it creates almost like a little side document or whatever you want to call it that contains that code in it, leaving the prompt window clean. Now, this might not feel like a big deal at first, but to me, as somebody that uses this stuff quite a bit, and sometimes for fairly complicated stuff where you got to go back and forth, it's the little things like this that really smooth out the process. Because something like this, it'll save me a few seconds when I do it. Maybe it'll save me 5 to 10 seconds of, looking over, make sure everything's formatted correctly, making sure my question's at the top and then the pasted thing below. But it also prevents certain errors from happening. And just like from a mental space perspective, it kind of helps keep everything organized. You multiply that across, 100 touch points that you have of the software, and it's kind of becomes a big deal. Cumulatively, it becomes very important. Now, I'm sure this will get copied quickly, meaning the design will get copied across everybody pretty quickly, but it's the little things like this. I gotta applaud Anthropic on this. They're not messing around. They are in it to win it. But coming back to this, so Claude 3.5 Sonnet, they're comparing it to Claude 3 Opus, the big previous model, and GPT-4o, as well as GPT 1.5 Pro. So literally like the best models in the space. So here, this new model dominates being the best in class on 4 out of the 5 tests that they're showing here. Quite a bit on the visual math reasoning, just a hair better on the science diagrams, slightly behind GPT-4o on the visual question answering, absolutely killing it on the chart Q&A. That's one where they struggle a lot. Speedometers, rulers, charts, something about like tracing lines is hard. If I pointed like right here where my mouse cursor is, you'd probably be able to guess what that number would be just visually. From what I've seen, the vision models tend to be really bad at things like that. And then absolutely incredible on the document visual Q&A. Then they talk about artifacts. And I gotta say, artifacts is the cherry on top of this beautiful, beautiful cake. It is good. It is very good. So we coded up a game where we have the code and the images that show up here in this artifact window that pops up, and all of them are saved. So you can go back, you can get all the images that you want, whether that's charts or graphs or pictures of evil monsters, as well as the code. Now, if I had to nitpick, I would say I didn't see an option to quickly download. Like if it generates 20 images, I don't think there's a button that just like downloads all 20. Maybe I missed it, but it's not a big deal. And I'm sure it's going to be a pretty easy addition. Everything else is just absolutely phenomenal. Also, the fact that it generates, like if you're coding, the code in one window and then writes up the instructions and the explanation of what it did, that also ends up being very, very helpful because you can grab the code, you can start pasting it wherever you need to paste it while it's generating out the write-up on the code, the natural language description of what happened. That feels a lot more natural, a lot more intuitive. The multi kind of window output for different stuff, again, seems like a little thing, but it's just out of this world when you start messing around with it and you realize how much easier it makes things. Those little polishes that make this thing really come together. They're saying that in terms of safety and privacy, this model is still top of the line. They're saying despite Claude 3.5 Sonnet's leap in intelligence, their red teaming assessments have concluded it still remains. And if you're not aware of this, they have, I think this is Anthropic that came up with this. And the founder, Dario, he does talk about this. So you have these AI safety levels, right? So ASLL 3 has, significantly higher risk, right? So basically those might have a substantially increased risk of catastrophic misuse, right? Somebody using it to hack or develop weapons or some weird stuff that we don't want them doing, or that show low-level autonomous capabilities. And the 4 and 5 and plus levels are not quite defined yet. They're speculative. And 2 is kind of where our present large language models kind of reside right now. And so Claude 3.5 Sonnet is still in that second tier of safety. So we're good Good. And of course, Claude 3.5 Haiku and Claude 3.5 Opus will be released later this year. So sometime in the next 6 months or so. I can't wait to try out Claude 3.5 Opus. That's going to be interesting to check out. Solve this word puzzle. What do you think it means?
The image doesn't show a specific word to sound out. It displays words and funny words repeated. These likely refer to amusing or peculiar terms that sound odd or make people laugh when spoken aloud.
How many times is the word funny written and how many times is the word words written, and what could that mean?
Funny appears twice, words appears 4 times. This layout could suggest a playful emphasis on humorous language.
This translates into a 4-word sentence. It starts with too funny, and how does it end?
Too funny for words.
All right, and what do you think this means?
Man overboard. It's a nautical phrase used to alert the
What do you think this means?
word boards. The letters are jumbled, but when rearranged, they spell word boards.
It actually means that there's a bear inside of something. Can you tell what the saying is about the bear?
Bear on board. The jumbled letters, WBOEODRS, can be rearranged to spell bear on board, which is a play on the common baby on board sign.
So the solution is bear in the blank. What is the blank?
The blank is woods. The full phrase is bear in the woods, which can be formed by rearranging
Bingo.
the letters in WORS.
What could this mean?
Long hill. The letters are arranged vertically, spelling hill from top to bottom. The vertical arrangement suggests height or length, implying a long hill.
The fact that it's spelled from top to bottom, could it mean something else?
Downhill. The vertical arrangement of hill from top to bottom suggests a descent or downward direction, hence downhill.
What could this mean?
Grass over me. The word grass is shown in green, suggesting the phrase grass over me, which typically means to be buried or forgotten.
That's not it. What else could it mean?
Grass is greener. The word grass in bright green could suggest the common phrase, the grass is greener on the other side.
I think it just says green grass. What does this mean?
Major league. The word league is often used in
I
sports
think it's little
contexts.
league. What does this mean?
The image shows the word promises, written in a fragmented or broken style. This could suggest unfulfilled promises, broken promises, or the complexity and fragility of commitment.
What does this mean?
Knock on wood. The word knock
Bingo.
is above timber, which is another word for wood.
What could this mean?
Playing side by side. The word playing is in a box with side written vertically next to it, suggesting the phrase playing side by side.
It's something else. What else could it mean?
Playing inside. The word playing is inside a box, and side is written vertically next to it, suggesting playing inside as the intended phrase.
That's close, but the answer is something different. What else could it mean?
Playing outside. The word playing is
Bingo.
inside a box.
So in summary, I would say, and keep in mind, this is about 6 hours after release. So I've been messing around with it for just under 6 hours. So far, everything about it seems good. I gotta say, it's the best model so far. And again, maybe once I use it for a few days, I'll start seeing more problems. Maybe I'll get disillusioned with it. But as I'm sitting here right now at the end of the first day that it's been alive, released, right now, this is probably the model that I've been the most excited about. Since GPT-4 came out, that was the big one that kind of blew everyone's expectation away. No other ones really did stoke the same kind of excitement. Not Claude 1 or 2. GPT-4 Turbo was cool. Gemini 1.0, sure. Claude 3 Opus certainly ruffled a few feathers. That was very interesting. It had there's definitely something there, some sort of spark of something. A lot of people thought that it's self-aware, it's conscious, whatever. There's talks about that. I don't think so. I think they just did a really good job of fine-tuning and training it so that it's just a little bit more, personable, but I can certainly see why people got kind of carried away with it. There were times when using it for various applications where you kind of went, whoa, this thing is, something's happening there, something new. Then we didn't have too much excitement after GPT-4o in of itself wasn't that exciting because really what people got so hyped up about was the voice mode, which hasn't been activated yet. So we keep seeing demos of real-time voice conversations with these assistants, but it's been announced, they said in the next few weeks, whatever, we still haven't seen it, frustratingly. And now comes Claude 3.5 Sonnet. And as I'm sitting here right now, I feel like it might be as monumental as GPT-4 was, specifically if we're looking at coding. And again, I got to do a lot more testing and make sure that's the case, but I'm seeing a lot of people on Twitter and I'm seeing my own results and everybody's kind of blown away. Here's Alex Albert. So he's at Anthropic AI, kind of showing all the stuff that he's been able to do with this new model. And here's an interesting thing he points out. He's saying Claude 3.5 Sonnet is the first model I've seen change the timelines of some of the best engineers I know. This is a real quote from one of our engineers after Claude 3.5 Sonnet fixed a bug in an open source library they were using. using. And so here's that engineer. So he's made anonymous. He's saying this is pretty unprecedented for me. Usually with problems of this level of complexity, the most Opus can do, right? So the previous big model, their best model up until today. So he's saying the most Opus can do is start me down a path or give me a couple options to try myself. If I push Opus too hard, it'll start to hallucinate solutions, start making predictable mistakes, or go in weird places. We've all been there. This is the first time that a model has gone the distance, which is literally the same thing that I've experienced with the few tests that I've done. It goes the distance. There isn't a cliff once you get too complex where it just crashes and burns. It just freaking goes. He's saying my goalposts have been permanently shifted by this interaction. He's saying Claude makes you feel like you have superpowers. Suddenly, no problem is too ambitious. The future of programming is here, folks. And yes, this is one of the guys on the team. And yes, they're hyping up their own product. And yes, you should all take it with a grain of salt. But man, I do feel like this is maybe spot on, that this isn't hype. The leap in coding feels gargantuan. It's not reflected very well in the benchmarks because the benchmarks move up, 10%, 5%, 2%, whatever. But what that translates to when you're using it is massive. Some people in the comments on Twitter are saying that, yeah, it's an incremental improvement. And sure, when you put it on a chart, it does look incremental. But when you're using it, when you're testing it, it doesn't feel like an incremental improvement. It feels like a step function. It looks like we went up a step. Anyways, I'll get off the hype train, but I do encourage you to try it out for yourself. See if you can code something up from scratch. Start simple, then keep adding functionality on top of it. Add graphics, have it generate the graphics, or grab some ambitious project from GitHub and see if it's able to break it down for you, if it's able to add functionality while keeping, everything working smoothly. I'm sure there'll be a million things that it can't do that it will fail at. We've seen a few here, but I gotta say, I'm feeling a lot more optimistic about the future of programming. Optimistic, or I guess pessimistic if you're looking at it from a perspective of jobs going away. I think this is definitely going to empower the best engineers to do more, but it's also going to allow a lot of people with little to no coding background to do something, to do some cool things, to build some useful things for themselves. So my hat's off to Anthropic. You guys keep doing whatever you're doing because it's working out just fine. With that said, my name is Wes Roth, and thank you for watching.